Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 100 of the HooperCast. Woo! I got Dustin and John on the phone today. Yeah, hi, guys.
One more episode, and you'll have as many episodes as Dalmatians.
That's true.
Oh, snap. You will.
Well, and I was telling Dustin a few months ago, like, once we get 100 episodes, we get syndication rights.
Yeah.
Although, unlike the television show Fringe, we will go beyond the bare minimum of 100 episodes.
Correct.
You know what I thought of recently, too? If this podcast were an actual, like, it actually had call letters, you know, like W whatever. I was thinking, like, God, what would they be? It can't be W WHUP because that's four letters with a W. But then I thought of WHUP with a little umlaut above it.
Yeah.
WHUP. So I seriously might start using that. It's kind of pretentious, but at the same time, it's like it sounds so cool. Like, welcome to WHUP, the HooperCast.
Yeah.
So, and in true radio fashion, we're recording this in the morning. We're not going to tell you when, because that will kind of ruin the magic. So, let's just say, happy weekend, everybody. Welcome to the 100th episode of the HooperCast. And today we have toiled, or I have toiled. We all worked hard on our lists, but I feel like it was especially difficult for me, being indecisive and unable to rank things numerically. We have all made a list of our top 5 favorite superhero films, obviously thus far. So,
oh yeah,
and it was a difficult journey for me, but I did it. I'm proud of myself, and I'm really intimidated to be comparing it to y'all's lists. Just so you know, especially Dustin.
Why me?
Because you don't understand, like here, okay, we're gonna get real here on the HooperCast today. Because Dustin in particular, because every time we record, I'm like, oh shit, Dustin's gonna have better stuff than me. Like it's like a, you know, I'm always like wary of like, oh man, Dustin's stuff is gonna be so good. So
DJ's on the warpath.
Dustin, you're a lot more
because I hate everything.
You're a lot. No. Well, lately, yeah, Dustin hates everything I like. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm sorry.
Dustin. No. You're too articulate. So I'm intellectually intimidated by your knowledge and your ability to form your thoughts cohesively.
Well, thank you, I guess, Hooper.
Yes, there you go. I guess in true fashion, the last time we made a list, I think, should we just read all the lists out and then talk about all the films by film?
We could do that.
Because, you know, we're probably going to end up with a couple that are not ranked quite the same. So, okay. Sure. Well, who wants to
Hooper, do you want to unveil yours first? Since
I'll go ahead and unveil mine first. The bronze podium will go first.
What?
Jesus.
So, well,
Good
no,
Lord.
it's just
Welcome to the self-deprecation cast.
keep in mind, like this is basically for me just a list of. For me, this was to be a list of the films that I enjoy the most of all the comic book movies I've seen. So for me, it's like there might be a couple listeners who might get angry about how I ranked them, but I'm purely going off of visceral enjoyment. You know, I wrote a little blurb for each one of my films that we can, you know, I'll mention when we talk about them. But for me, it was all about the ones I purely enjoyed watching and had lots of rewatchability, you know. So,
Sure.
Okay. Well, my number 5 is the first Avengers movie, the 2012 Avengers.
Okay.
My number 4 is The Dark Knight. Mm-hmm. My number 3 is Spider-Man 2, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man, obviously. Mm-hmm. My number 2 is The Avengers: Age of Ultron. Mm-hmm. And my number 1 is Captain America: The Winter Soldier.
Awesome.
So that is my list. I literally took all the movies I'd seen, and every day I just knocked 5 of them off my list every single day, up until yesterday when I ranked. I had the 5, and then I had to rank them. So there we go. That's my list. All right, Johnny, give me yours.
Number 5 for me was Dark Knight Rises. Mm-hmm. Number 4 was Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, the first one.
Mm-hmm.
Number 3 was the Avengers. Number 2 was Captain America: The Winter Soldier. And number 1 was The Dark Knight.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, Dustin, let's have yours.
Okay, so my number 5 is Captain America: The Winter Soldier. Number 4 is The Incredibles. Number 3 is Superman the Movie. Number 2 is Spider-Man 2. And number 1 is Batman Begins.
Christopher Nolan had a little hat trick with our lists.
He did. And so did the Russos.
Yeah, so did the Russos.
And Sam Raimi.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, which one do you guys want to talk about first? I mean, we had... do you want to talk about some of the outliers first, and then we can get into the ones we had in common later? Which ones...
Yeah, that'd work.
Yeah, sure.
Dustin, why don't you talk about Superman the movie, because that didn't make me or John's list.
Yeah, I think I've got 3 that didn't make any of y'all's list.
Yes, that's true.
So, Superman the movie, for me, I think this is a fitting one to start breaking down on, because it sort of invented the superhero movie. I mean, obviously there had been superhero films before that, like Adam West's Batman, and just obviously like the old serials, and there was even Superman versus the Mole Men in the 50s. So, I mean, this wasn't the first superhero movie, but it was sort of the first blockbuster superhero movie. And so it very much defined the formula and the way that the story will unfold for years to come. And even if you look at Sam Raimi's films, they follow a very similar path to Richard Donner's Superman franchise. So with the first film being, the origin story, the second film being him giving up or flirting with the idea of giving up his powers, giving up his role as a superhero, and the third film being, the evil version coming around. So they very much mimic each other in that way. So for me, Superman the movie laid the groundwork for everything that was to come. Christopher Reeve, to me, is still the pinnacle of Superman actors, not necessarily because he looks more like Superman than, say, Henry Cavill, who I feel like is kind of ripped right off the page, but because Christopher Reeve was able to breathe life into 2 characters, Clark Kent and Superman, and make them distinct and different from one another. And the film was able to take a grounded, in reality approach to the film. Its tagline was, "You'll believe a man can fly." It was supposed to remind you of what this character would be like in our current world. And so obviously, because it was so sort of entrenched in the 1970s, and that was built into that just the groundwork of the film, when you watch it now, there's a little bit of a distance. It feels farther away. It feels more dated. But really, to me, it holds up remarkably well, not just in terms of visual effects, but in terms of character development. So in this film, you've got a character, you get to know a character and why he is the way that he is. And so by the time the threat rises, you know how Superman's going to deal with what comes his way. And because you know him so intimately as a character. And there are a lot of superhero films that have come and gone through the years. I'm looking at the Joel Schumacher, Tim Burton era Batman films that are more focused on the villain than the hero. And this film was the polar opposite of that. The villain was the afterthought. The hero, it was about Superman. So for me, Superman the movie not only ignited my passion for Superman, but also my passion for superhero stories in general. And so for me, it's got to be on any list of the best superhero films of all time.
See what I mean? That was very succinct.
Wow. I love the tagline for that movie. I've always thought that was one of the great movie taglines.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like directed right at the audience.
All the way through.
Oh, I gotcha.
Yeah,
I love it.
I do too. Yeah.
It's so cool to me because it's really 3 movies in one. You start on Krypton, which is very science fiction. And then you get a good, I don't know, half hour maybe in Smallville. So it's a Western. It's like John Ford era, like huge landscapes and very American feeling. And then we go to our modern, like blockbuster kind of a 70s, I don't know, not French Connection. I only say that because of Gene Hackman, but like a 70s, film. And so anyway, it's almost 3 movies in one. And I just think it's really cool.
John, do you have any additional thoughts on Superman, the movie?
No, I will agree that Christopher Reeve is probably the defining actor for Superman. I don't think that they'll ever have someone who fits that role, is so distinct in that role. But yeah, I mean, yeah, from what I've seen, it's very good. So
yeah. I'll just add a quick thought so that people don't think that I don't like it. I agree with everything you said, Dustin, about it. For me, I'm not proud of this trait, but I'm very hard to please when it comes to movies that were made, before I was born, or movies I hadn't seen growing up, or stuff like that.
Sure.
So the movie does carry all the merits for me. It's just I think I saw it too late enough to appreciate it as much.
I gotcha.
But
no, it's true that if you look back on it, I mean, some of it's hokey, some of it's cheesy, some of it's campy. But for me, I guess at least with this one too, I like to look at it not just through the eyes of now and how important it is still to superhero movies, but also how important it was back then that people had never seen anything like this. I mean, this is a man literally flying at super speed and doing all of these things that you've always read about, and you never thought you could actually see it believably in film. I mean, you've got all the George Reeves stuff where it's like super close up, so you can hardly see the background when he's flying. And then you've got Kirk Allen before him, who every time, and this is absolutely true, you can look it up and it's hilarious. Every time he flies, he becomes an animated character. He's he's literally animated. No longer is he a live action, and because they couldn't do it. So anyway, this was the first, kind of let's peel this right off the page and give them what they've always wanted, and for that I got to give it points. But yeah, but I see what you're talking about.
I always thought it'd be amazing to take like something like the Avengers or Man of Steel or Transformers or something back to the 30s or 40s.
Dude, that would be hilarious. Yeah. Check this out, Humphrey Bogart. You're going to be obsolete.
Real to them. and another thing, too, you were saying, at times it's kind of cheesy and hokey. And I think that superhero movies should embrace that more. And
I think so, too.
More with the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films. But I think that
sure.
There are certain brands and characters that that sort of thing fits with. And feels
exactly.
awkward without. So
exactly.
Yeah, like I said, we'll get into that more, I'm sure. But yeah,
sure.
I don't think that's ever a bad thing.
No, me neither.
Why don't we talk about The Incredibles next, Dustin?
Okay. I know we all have seen this movie and we all like this movie, and probably everybody who's listening to the podcast today has seen it and likes it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it, but essentially, to me, this is a story that is more about character than about, action. It's a story that talks about the nature of family and the way that the husband feels the burden of responsibility for his family. It talks about the way that the wife interacts with him and wants to be a part of that, but he shuts her out. It's a lot of mature themes happening in this movie for an animated film. And on top of that, you've got this villain who has targeted your entire family for extinction. And so it's not, even though there is, a big, citywide, chase and fight kind of thing, it's a very personal film because Mr. Incredible knows what this means is the death of his entire family if he fails. And not just his family, but all of his friends, like Frozone, and some of the friends that he's already had are dead. So this is a very personal film, and there's a lot of mature themes and very memorable moments hidden throughout the film. And I mean, I don't really know what I can say about it that it hasn't already been said, but it's just a solid piece of filmmaking, and it's insanely rewatchable because it's just fun, and the characters bounce, and they all have these distinct, not just looks in terms of the character design, but also in terms of their powers. And really, I think I heard it said once that this is the best Fantastic Four movie that will ever be made.
Yeah.
And that's probably true, but, I just love the family dynamic, and that that's one of the things that I've always loved about The Flash, is that these Flashes are sort of a family, and same with the Fantastic Four. So I love just the idea that this is a modern, contemporary family dealing with super extraordinary events, and how they can embrace what they are, what each other are, and what they can do, and come together and be, a more complete family unit at the end of the film than they were when it began. And I just think it's got solid character arcs for all of the characters. And what else can you say about The Incredibles?
Great movie,
yeah.
Solid choice.
Yeah, that's a great choice. So that was that one
funny.
you were talking about not being based on a comic book. I was wondering which one was going to be.
Yeah, I texted Hooper this morning and was like, hold on, what are we calling this? Are we calling this best superhero movies or best comic book movies? Because it occurred to me literally just this morning that may be invalidated had we titled this the other thing. So anyway, yeah, but since we're calling it superhero movies, I'm gonna stick by that as my number 4 because it's just so rewatchable, and it's funny, and it's got heart, and everything you want from a movie plus superpowers. So
and it's like an honorary comic book movie too.
Yeah,
I don't
absolutely.
think anyone would sit there and say, it has all the familiar markings of something that would be a comic book movie. So
exactly.
Why don't we take a break from only Dustin's list?
Yeah.
Let's talk about the Avengers, because this was John's number 3 and this was my number 5. So John, why did you pick?
Dustin had it, right?
No, Dustin did not have it.
Oh, no.
No, because I'm a hater.
Dustin's a hater.
I said that and I was like, no. Yeah, I hate fun. I hate superhero movies that are fun to watch.
It's weird. At the end of my little blurb that I wrote about this movie, I literally put the last 3 words are literally in all caps. Fun to watch. It's funny you should say that. John, why is this on your list?
This is on my list because it was kind of like what Dustin was saying with Superman initially, was that this was something that was completely new and unique to audiences. And it's a superhero film, so that's not new, but it's new in the way that it was all brought together. It was the first time seeing all these heroes from these standalone movies over several years brought together in one movie. And, that will never happen again in that way. It was just such a unique thing to see, and to me, I find myself watching it, every few months or whatever, and every time I notice something new, or it does a very good job of laying out these characters and showing their differences and showing how they get along and interact, and as a viewer, it was just kind of eye candy seeing Thor fight Iron Man and Captain America with Iron Man and all these other characters together after seeing them in their own movies. And it's fun to watch. It's like the ultimate superhero popcorn movie to me, and it doesn't really have anything to say. It's not particularly deep, but looking back at it, to me, it's just like such a monumental thing to pull off, because it so easily could have gone off the rails at so many points, and so it's a fun movie. It has one of the best comic book villains I think ever, and it's fun to watch over and over.
This movie had the only Marvel villain that Dustin is satisfied with.
I think he's one of the few that people are
Well, right. I mean,
Yeah.
I was reading an article last night. I think it's an old one, but it was basically I think it was a real quick blurb about George R.R. Martin, the author of the Game of Thrones books, and what he says was Marvel's villain problem, and his complaint was that they're too much like the hero, you know, like the Yellow Jacket is just bad Ant-Man, you know, Ironmonger was just bad Iron Man, and what's his face? I think maybe he said I can't remember the third guy. Venom was just bad Spider-Man. So, you know, you could argue maybe that Loki is, by that logic, that Loki is bad Thor, but he's not. He's completely different.
Abomination is bad Hulk.
Yeah, that's right. That was one of the examples. Abomination was bad Hulk. So, you know, but well, I wrote about this is my number 5, and it's like you said, John. I mean, it was the first film of its kind. It was able to wrangle big characters who all had their own movies and make them even larger than life than before. It was able to establish their physical and emotional relationships with one another. What I mean by physical, I mean like their powers. Like, you know, they're really careful. Joss Whedon and everyone else was real careful to establish not just to have Captain America and Thor each punch like a piece of steel and have it make the exact same imprint. It's like, who's stronger? Well, Thor is stronger. How much stronger? Like, you know, Captain America has what's his power level? What's Thor's power level? What's Iron Man's? You know, how much would a hammer hit from Thor hurt Iron Man's suit? You know, stuff like that. And the idea that even the Hulk cannot pick up Mjolnir, and Thor could stop a punch from the Incredible Hulk. You know, that sort of thing. So it established all those relationships with one another, which is successful world building to me, and essential to having an ensemble superhero cast. You have to establish how much stronger they are than one another. But most importantly, it was an artfully executed film that was fun to watch. And it's just like you said, John. I mean, I catch myself watching this movie and a lot of the Marvel movies like every few weeks or months for sure, but even weeks at times, because they're just so entertaining. I mean, and this film makes my list because of all the 54 superhero movies I'd seen, this was one of the most likely. Well, you know, specifically the 5th most likely that I will sit down and watch if I just want to watch an entertaining movie. And really, of all the films on my list, this probably has the most. Oh, that's not true. The Dark Knight has a more consistent Rotten Tomatoes score. But I mean, this film's got a 92 on Rotten Tomatoes. It's got a 91 with the audience. I mean, not that. For the record, I looked up these scores after I made my list, so it wouldn't really influence it. But this is it's a great film. You know, it definitely has its problems. I mean, the first 30 or 40 minutes is kind of boring, but you know, that's character stuff, and that's necessary for context, obviously.
And I'll go ahead and talk too, so people don't think I hate it. The reason this didn't make my list isn't because I don't like it. It's just because there are movies that I would rather rewatch.
Yes,
and I own this movie, and I do rewatch this movie. There are just others that I watch and rewatch more. So I can't really hate on this movie. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, I'm just going to be like, hey, there are also other good movies out there. Mm-hmm. And that's all I can say to it. So, yeah.
Sticking with this theme, I want to go ahead and I guess I'll talk about Avengers: Age of Ultron, because this was another one-off in terms of our lists.
Sure.
So this is my number 2. And my thoughts are basically, while it doesn't do much for the character's growth, it continues to balance even more characters. I think in a way that makes sense. It could be argued, it has been argued that they didn't do a good job with all the character balance, but they continued to develop a satisfying interaction between all of them, even more so than the first Avengers, where they had, you know, some interesting character-appropriate relationships with one another. But this one builds upon that even more now that they're a cohesive team. I think it balanced all their screen time a lot better than the first Avengers, specifically with Hawkeye. And the action sequence, it had way more action beats and all the actions and well placed and proportioned action sequences, and each one of them incredibly tense and breathtaking to watch, and seeing them all work as a well-oiled unit. And I just thought this movie was endlessly fun to watch. And I mean, I really sat down and thought, well, is the fact that this is the most recent film on my list clouding my judgment? But I don't think it is, because I've watched it over and over and over, for the past however long it's been out on Blu-ray, and I've just been picking it apart. And I'm like, no, I mean, I really like this movie, and it has the lowest score on Rotten Tomatoes from the critics of all the movies on my list. It's got a 74, but this has an audience score of 86. I mean,
very good.
Yeah, I mean, this has this has an audience score of 86. I mean, that's higher than Spider-Man 2. So I mean, I don't think as many people hate this movie on the internet as claim to, or it just goes to show you the internet's a vocal minority. I mean, this is a generally well-received movie, and I thought it was really fun. I think it did, especially as a follow-up. I mean, again, a lot of people don't believe this, but I thought it was executed even better than the first Avengers, to be honest. They didn't go completely, balls to the wall, jumping the shark to try and outdo the first Avengers. I just think they appropriately did more. And I thought this was a well-executed film. And, as bitter as he might want to be about it, I feel like Joss Whedon can be very proud of his work with the Marvel Universe, but with this final film of his as well.
Yeah, and to that point, if you make a Marvel movie and then you walk away feeling bad for yourself, get over yourself. You just made a Marvel movie that entertained a whole lot of people. You know what I mean? Ugh.
It's funny because, I read recently an article that was saying how, I guess, Disney considers this movie to be a financial failure.
Yeah.
But
really?
it made $1.5 billion.
Holy cow.
So, I don't think anyone should be, hurting over this, but
No.
I would say this would be like my 6 or 7, so it was close to making mine. And I love this movie. I think it's, again, like the first Avengers, it's just fun to watch, and it's great seeing these characters interact with one another, and I know it turned some people off, but I enjoyed it a lot, and I thought Ultron was one of the better villains of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. James Spader did a great job playing that character, and
yes.
I love it.
I think there's so much going on in it visually that even like the character scenes, I think even those keep your attention. I mean, this I'd rather watch this in terms of like just plopping down to watch something more often, or even in pieces rather, like scene by scene, or even 20 minutes at a time, than I would rather, my number one, The Winter Soldier. I mean, The Winter Soldier is my number one over this movie for a reason, but like in terms of, I just think every piece of this film is visually stunning and interesting, and I just think it's well done. Let's take a DC detour. I'm going to call it. A DC tour. Let's go back to Dustin. Dustin, talk about Batman Begins.
Okay.
Your number one.
Yeah, Batman Begins is my number one for a bunch of reasons. So, on a personal level, it's my number one because so I had always been interested in superhero movies, obviously. I'd always been, really Spider-Man was kind of my number one. I loved all this stuff. Loved the cartoons growing up, Batman animated series, the 90s Spider-Man show. All of that stuff, just like I ate it up. But there was a time when I felt like, maybe I was growing or outgrowing it, because maybe everything that I was seeing was more geared to children and I was, maturing. And so this to me was sort of like the first big thing that said, hey, these characters can be mature and you don't have to let them go, because here they are presented in, in real world context, with all of the depth and layers that you would expect from a good movie or that you would expect from a good story, and it just so happens to be based on a comic book. And so for me, on a personal level, I really think it was this movie, over even Batman the Animated Series, that sort of projected Batman up into like the stratosphere for me, so that now that he is the top of the top in the superhero world, for me. So on a personal level, there's that. On a filmmaking level, here's what I'm going to say about this movie. I love the nonlinear storytelling. I love that they treat the audience like you're smart enough to follow the story without ever really explaining what they're doing. That's just Christopher Nolan at work, or early Christopher Nolan. I love the fact that, like I said, they treat these characters like they're real. And one of the big things after this film came out was everybody was just sort of floored by how realistic this Batman was. And maybe that's because we had become accustomed to Joel Schumacher's Batman, where the Batmobile's driving up the side of walls, and like Tommy Lee Jones is, hamming it up, and Jim Carrey's chewing on the scenery. But the truth is, this was like, realistic, grounded, modern, gritty Batman, as it should have been. And the reason that I put this over The Dark Knight or The Dark Knight Rises is because of this. To me, well, I always love the origin story of Batman. I think this is just the ultimate story of overcoming your problems, overcoming your weaknesses for something better. And so I love the origin story of Batman. But I think even more than that, what I love about this is it gets the character of Batman right in a way that the following two films do not. And that's not to say that I don't enjoy The Dark Knight or The Dark Knight Rises, because anybody who knows me knows that I, love those movies to death. But there's a very distinct difference between this Batman and those two Batman. And I don't know if it was a decision made by Christian Bale and Christopher Nolan in tandem, or if it was the screenwriters just gradually, veering off track, or what it was. But this particular version of Batman displays all of the determination, all of the perseverance, and all of the fortitude that Batman should have, whereas the next two films don't show that as much. This Batman is a Batman who says, I can't be with you, Rachel, because Gotham needs me more. The next two Batman movies are, well, I kind of don't feel like being Batman anymore. This Batman is the Batman that literally gives until, like, you just can't give anymore. The other two Batmen take it easy. And I know I say that, breaking the back and all that stuff, but it just, to me, this feels more like the comics Batman. This feels more like the animated series Batman. This feels more like my Batman than the other two movies, which to me feel more like a James Bond movie with Batman gadgets, which is cool, and I love it. But this is Batman to me. Everything from, like just the way the city looks. There's a very distinct difference in the way that Gotham looks here than it does in The Dark Knight. The Dark Knight's like way more like clean and modern. This is just gritty and brown and gross and disgusting the whole way through. And that's the way that Gotham ought to be. So there's a lot that changed in between the two films, and I don't know who really was behind that, but Batman Begins perfectly captures Batman, even down to the last line where Gordon says, I never said thank you, and Batman says, and you'll never have to, and jumps. Like, that is Batman. That's Batman through and through, and the other two films don't have a Batman moment like that to me. So for me, this is Batman, and another great thing is that you can come off of this Batman, and if you so choose, this Batman can lead into any interpretation of Batman. If you want to believe that this Batman could be the super detective, guess what? He can be. Like, I don't know if this makes sense or if it just makes sense in my head, but this Batman was so perfect a Batman origin film that if you wanted to, you could make the next film it didn't have to be The Dark Knight. It could be anything. Like, it could have been, Batman having to solve, the Riddler. It could have been, Detective Batman. Or it could have been any number of interpretations of Batman, because this was so purely Batman that it could have gone anywhere. Does that make sense, or am I just kind of crazy? So, yeah. So, like, for me, there are a lot of movies out there like let's look at, Iron Man. I love that first Iron Man movie, but it's its own thing, right? It's never going to be any other interpretation of Iron Man. It is what it is. Whereas this version of Batman, I feel, was so purely Batman, like across all borders, because you've got that dark, gritty Batman who grabs Scarecrow by the neck and says, tell me where the drugs are. And you've got the more heroic Batman who tosses a kid a pair of binoculars to make him feel better. This is so purely Batman that he could have become any interpretation of Batman. And so for me, this is my number one. Maybe it's because Batman's my favorite character. Maybe it's because of the personal reasons of it sort of speaking to me when I needed it. Who knows? But the point is, to me, this is the most rewatchable, and it probably is, out of all of my movies, the one that I've watched the most, and the one that had. I've never come out of a superhero film so intensely on fire about that character as I did with Batman Begins. As soon as Batman Begins was over, I was like, I've got to go to the comic book store. I got to buy some Batman books. I got to buy Batman animated series. I got to get it. And so anyway, for me, Batman Begins is my favorite superhero film of all time.
This almost made my list. I mean, it was right there with me too for the same reason. Yeah. I think this movie, even with them, this is one of those movies where even if they were to, even with recasting Batman, like let's say the Affleck movie or movies come out at least decent. I mean, if you were trying to introduce Batman cinematically to somebody, no matter who's playing the character, this would be one of those movies where you'd be like, look, this is important to see, though, because this nails the character. It's not Ben Affleck or, whoever plays him, 15 years from now. It's like, but back in 2005, a guy named Christian Bale played him, and this is the seminal origin story of Batman, regardless of who's playing him. And for that reason, it deserves recognition.
Exactly.
John, do you have any thoughts?
No, not really. I've only seen this film maybe once or twice, and I don't remember it connecting with me the way that the other two did. But
gotcha.
It was very good. It just, to me, it didn't quite have the rewatchability that the second and the third movie did. But it's by no means a bad movie. It's well shot. It's well acted, and like you said, it kind of perfectly captures that character of Batman, and draws a lot of influence from Batman Year One, which is one of my favorite absolutely. Batman stories. So, yeah,
mine too.
Yeah. So,
let's talk about The Dark Knight, because this is John's number one, and this is my number 4 movie. John, so this is your number 1. Explain yourself.
Why?
Why?
I mean, for me, this movie kind of transcended what most people think of when they think of a comic book movie. This isn't colorful. It's not the most fun movie you'll ever watch. It's bleak and it's dark and some would even probably say depressing. When it came out, it was this huge movie, but at the core of it was this movie that to me represented what a comic book movie could be. In terms of what it's trying to say and its characters and its themes, and which for at the time it was very immature. And they've had comic book movies that have come out since, but this was kind of a watershed movie for me, at least in that regard. That this was a comic book film that could say something important and that could have characters that are monsters and disturbing and all these sort of things. And I think this film is easily one of the best looking comic book films ever made. The direction is great. The acting is superb, especially for to me, this was a film that really explored, in terms of, usually you see a comic book villain, at the time, I'm taking someone like Green Goblin or Doc Ock or something, who's intent on taking over the world, and he's just evil. He likes hurting people. But the Joker in this film and the things that he brought up, they were psychologically dangerous. He was never really a physical threat to Batman, but he was psychologically dangerous in a way that we've never seen a comic book villain, or even, this isn't even explored outside of comic book movies very often, but this was a villain who wanted to introduce these ideas to Gotham and really tear it apart in a different way. And so it was kind of subverting what a comic book villain could be and should be. And it's kind of been emulated since by other comic book movies, but at the time that was pretty unique. And because these are dangerous things that could happen in real life. Pitting people against each other and kind of bringing them to their breaking point where humanity would turn on each other. And the suggestion that it only took one thing to make society just crumble. And I find myself, every time this movie comes on, there's certain points in the movie where Nolan has like three things going on at once, and he keeps cutting between these things. This happens like 3 or 4 times in the movie.
Yeah, with perfect pace.
And every time that happens, it's just so tense. And the way it's edited and the way it's put together, I mean, it's just, it's great. It's like the perfect sequence, all those sequences in that movie. It's kind of like, I always go back to Empire Strikes Back. Like they're not Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi. At the very end of that, there's 3 different character groups that we're following, and they're all tied together in this big set piece. And I figured like the Nolan movies kind of took that and made it better. So you have these sequences that are ramping up continually, and the music is ramping up, and then it's just great. I love it for those reasons. So those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I think that this works. I like this movie. This movie made my list. By the way, this has a 94 on Rotten Tomatoes with critics and the audience. They were exactly in sync. But I think this works as a true-to-life version of a Batman graphic novel, but also, regardless of any superhero context, as just a regular crime thriller starring Batman. And it's like you said, it explores very interesting psychological themes and dynamics. Not just like a MacGuffin that Batman has to stop or the Joker will do something. Like it's very heavy on specific themes, and it has genuine stakes, and it pits him against and this film does not have the villain problem that George R.R. Martin mentioned. This villain is nothing like Batman. He's not physically fit. He's not disciplined. He is unpredictable. And he is very intelligent. And this is something else that, Dustin, I think you mentioned way back when we were talking about the Marvel villains and what the problem was. And you'd said you had referred to the first Spider-Man and the moment on the bridge with choosing the kids over Mary Jane. That's a very important element when a villain is able to push our hero's limits and test his mettle, and that's what the Joker is doing to Batman in this film. And so that's the reason it made my list, is because it's unique from other movies on my list in that way, where you have a villain whose singular goal, aside from like his broader plan for the city, but his singular goal for our protagonist is to break him, like is to demoralize him. To where, in a way that not only is he like a threat to the whole city, but it feels very personal to Batman himself.
And another thing, too, was I liked in the film that it graded kind of the lines of what a hero was and what a villain was. And Batman has always been a heroic character, but he's always kind of gone about it in a way that could be looked at as, he's a vigilante, basically.
Right.
So for me, you have the scene where the Joker says, "Batman, take off your mask. I'm going to kill people." And Batman is debating whether or not to do that. Should I reveal myself or should I let these people die? And I feel like the film kind of explores that aspect too of what it means to be a hero and what's the line there when a hero Spider-Man's a hero because he saves people. He never has these kind of moral dilemmas of people are going to die no matter what I do. What's the best, course of action here? So it explored those type of themes in a way that was unique and interesting to me as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm not going to add much to this other than just to say that this is a solid movie, and it was between this and Winter Soldier for me, and I eventually went with Winter Soldier because I didn't want to have a character represented more than once on here. That was simply the reason. So yeah, this definitely could have been a top 5 movie for me, but yeah.
Well, speaking of representing them twice, John, let's talk about The Dark Knight Rises, your number 5.
Yeah. I know that this is a controversial entry, I guess. A lot of people have kind of come out against this movie, but like you said, I looked up the Rotten Tomatoes scores, and this has like an 87 on Rotten Tomatoes, so people didn't hate it by any means. But,
right.
But,
I think once again, Rotten Tomato is higher than Batman Begins, to be honest.
Oh, is it really? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is once again the case of of the internet and critics completely misrepresenting how people. It's just like politics. Like it's completely out of touch with how people, the general public, feels about this film.
Right.
Sure.
Well, and this is just an aside, but this came out the same summer as the Avengers, and to me, you couldn't have like 2 different films, and they both made boatloads of money. So but I chose this film because this to me was the continuation of that story in The Dark Knight, and Batman Begins, obviously, but to me, this brought about a film where again you're kind of blurring the lines of what it means to be a hero, and throughout the film, Batman's contemplating. At the beginning of the film, he is no longer Batman. He hasn't been Batman for years, and suddenly again we have this villain that really has some dangerous things to say, and certainly a very subversive villain and group of people that have come to Gotham, and Batman has to step back into the costume and put himself back out there. But I feel like this was a film that kind of took the things that made The Dark Knight special and flipped it on its head, but in a good way. So you have Bane, who again is probably one of my favorite comic book villains, but this is a guy who not only is a physical match to Batman, he's stronger than Batman, but he is also smart. He's dangerous. He knows he has the gift of speech. He can inspire people, and he has these dangerous ideas. So I thought that was a good match in a way that the Joker really wasn't. But it's not that it doesn't fit within that world. Again, this kind of felt like The Dark Knight. The direction is very similar, and the way that the scenes are handled. Again, you have those scenes where several things are happening at once, and they're cutting between them, and it's just overall it was a great movie. It does have its flaws. It does have some plot holes and things like that. But overall, I really enjoyed this, and I thought it was again just so unique for a comic book movie to explore these things. And it's not colorful and it's bleak, and you have this man who breaks another man's back, and and I thought it was a good ending, if not the traditional Batman ending. I thought it was a good ending for that iteration of the Bruce Wayne character, and kind of throughout the film they show that Batman can really be anybody. Batman is more of a symbol, so anyone can be Batman, and so they kind of follow up on that in the end, and yeah.
I enjoyed this movie because, like, what you were talking about. I like what is going on emotionally with Bruce Wayne, and aside from maybe either the pacing or plot or the villain, even I appreciated. I was emotionally dialed in to what was going on with Bruce the whole time, and I'm not really like. Concerned about how the hell did his back heal so quickly, and how did he climb out of a hole or anything like that. I'm more tuned into the idea of him being broken and building himself back up, like as a theme. I mean, I'm interested in that just as a person, but I'm very interested in people. It's like Dustin said with Batman Begins. I'm interested in the people who whose lives could be completely terrible based on what's happened to them, but instead of being victims, they choose to build themselves up and to do good. And I'm interested in that idea with Batman. So even when he's physically broken down, he takes that character trait of himself, manifests it physically, and he comes out of it and triumphs. And I too like the idea that anybody could be Batman, because there's literally nothing special about him, unique from what anyone else could. Everything he does as Batman, aside from him being rich, which even is something that you could choose. That's a behavior you could willingly implement for yourself. You can choose to like with his parents, like he could have just sulked and been depressed his whole life and, done nothing, or he could have become Batman. And that choice and the outcome of that choice is a macro version of all the little choices we make in our lives. So that sounds kind of uppity and preachy, but like I really do like that's what Batman means to me, in that way. Like we are all our choices, and I don't know. I guess this movie, just at the end of the trilogy, it really kind of puts a cap on that pretty nicely. Aside from how did he survive a nuclear explosion and things like that, but that really is not important to me. That's not the point of this film to me.
I think for me, I can simultaneously enjoy and critique this film because well, first of all, I just love Batman, and I mean, to be honest, if you decided, hey, let's watch Batman and Robin today, I would be like, okay, because I just love Batman, and you know what? Yeah, that's an awful movie, and no one's ever gonna like say, I don't know, I like Batman and Robin, but the truth is, like, I don't know, I kind of can see where it's coming from. Like, it's, to me, there's no wrong interpretation of Batman. I mean, if you want that one or Adam West or this or Frank Miller, those are all valid interpretations of Batman, and everyone's got their own preferences, but they're all valid. And that's another thing that I love about Batman. But for me, so I enjoy this film, and I enjoy what it is. I enjoy the ending that it gives to Christian Bale's Batman. I don't think that the ending is appropriate for the Batman character. And that's sort of what I meant earlier when I said I think that they sort of don't understand the character by the end that they did at the beginning. Because the fortitude of a character to look in the eyes of the woman he loves and says, I can't be with you because Gotham needs me more, is different from, hey, I just met this kind of random hooker and we're just going to go travel around the world together. That to me is a very different character. I guess what I'm saying is while I do think it's a fitting end for this version of Batman, it is not a fitting end for Batman. In other words, I can never see Bruce, like if you just think, regardless of interpretation, just think of the character Bruce Wayne, is he ever going to say, you know what, I think I'm just going to go like pretend to be dead and chill for a while? No, he's going to say, oh, I'm sorry, does crime still exist? Well, then Batman exists too. And I'm going to do it because, to ape a line from Uncle Ben, with great power comes great responsibility, and Bruce Wayne has that power, so therefore he has that responsibility. And to have him just kind of chill, is him shirking responsibility. And that's not the determination of Batman that I love. That to me is something different. And so I can appreciate this film for what it is in its interpretation, but I cannot appreciate it for what it says about the character of Batman, because I feel like it says something that isn't true. So to me, I can like this film and not like it at the same time, and it's one of those weird things where, like, when I'm like, if you put this movie in and I'm watching it, and I'm like, oh snap, I'm gonna sit here and watch the whole thing every time, but at the same time, like, it's not one that I look back on and say, like, wow, that was a great movie. You know what I mean? It's a really weird conundrum in that way. But yeah, so yeah, no, I
think it has a similar problem to other Christopher Nolan movies I like, which is I really like most of the film, and then the last few minutes really kind of bothers me, and borderline ruins it for me. So yeah, that's one of those things where it's just like, maybe I hate people who do this too, but I'm gonna just pretend that last few minutes didn't exist, and that's a kind of dumb way for me personally to accept the events of the film. But I chalk that up to like a strange mistake when writing, and But
even then, how far back in the film do you go to stop it? Because in order to stop Bane, you have to have Catwoman, Deus Ex Machina to save Batman. Mm-hmm. And I don't have a problem with another character saving Batman from a threat that he can't handle, so long as that's sort of the theme of the story is that he needs to learn to trust other people. And that's sort of the whole point of the Robin character or the Batgirl character or whatever. But for me, when it's a Deus Ex Machina like that, like how far – I guess my question is how far – for me to say, okay, I'm going to ignore the last bit, like I've got to go pretty far. I've got to go to like him getting out of that pit and being like, yeah, Batman, and then just make up the rest of it and be like, he goes and he kills some, not kills, but he goes and he beats some people up. Yay! Like I have to make the whole thing up myself because I know, right? But
he snapped.
The back changed me. But yeah, no, I don't know, man. It's a strange one for me because I do love the movie, but I do also critique it a lot. So
sure, I get that. And one more thing too. And
sure.
For me, when this came out, a lot of people didn't like the way that Bane spoke.
Yeah,
and his whole persona. But to me, that was one of the things that made the film distinctive.
Yes,
it wasn't just a gimmicky thing. It was that actually added, credibility to him, and it actually made him more menacing than I think he would have been if he didn't have that sort of way of thinking.
Absolutely.
And this was released right at the height of that Occupy Wall Street movement, and that was very Bane. So to me, it was kind of like the film was so entrenched in what was going on when that came out, and it felt very,
very
related
timely
to that. Yeah. And so to me, it was kind of like you were hitting the current issues that people are talking about, and here's this figure who's the villain in the film talking about things that are really going on and that people really,
totally
believe. And so it was these dangerous ideals that we were seeing in the news, and then you go see the movie, and it was just like the same thing, So it was very interesting in that way that they were hitting these topics and things like that were actually happening. And so to me, that was another reason that I liked the movie. It was kind of like the Mandarin. If you go back and watch Iron Man 3 now, I say the Mandarin. I mean, you know what I'm saying. The sequences with the Mandarin, But I mean, it's kind of topical now with what's going on, in the world. If you go back and watch that film, it's very. It takes on a different vibe now because that was released, years ago. But it's kind of. You go back and watch that the sequences, and it's chilling,
Well, that was only a year before. I mean, this is a terrorist who's essentially making videos of where he's executing people, and and 1 year later you have ISIS show up, and that's what they're doing.
Right.
Yeah, any movie that can I'll give any movie extra points for having for being good on its own, but being enriched by a social context.
Sure. Right. And the thing with Bane is that philosophy isn't like it's not a topical thing necessarily. Like I feel like people have felt that way for a long time and will continue to feel that way. But it was so embodied in that moment when this movie came out. I feel like so it enhanced the movie because it spoke to the people at that time.
Yeah,
absolutely. I agree.
Let's move on. Let's switch back over to Marvel now.
Marvelous.
Let's
Marvelous.
let's talk about the first Spider-Man movie.
Okay.
Because John, this is your number 4.
This was, yeah. And I think probably the question is why I didn't pick Spider-Man 2 instead of this.
I'm curious. Yes.
Yeah, and for me, this film is kind of like Batman Begins with Dustin. This was a film that I went to go see, and this was the first film that I ever saw that was sold out when I went to go see it. And we had to come back and see a later showing or whatever. And so, to me, this was a film that everyone enjoyed. comics, but this kind of really brought him into a different level in terms of his pop culture status. And
Absolutely.
So, to me, this is kind of like the flip side of the Christopher Nolan Batman films, and so I measure each comic book movie to, if you're going for a more serious kind of, mature look for your film, I measure it against The Dark Knight. But if you're making like a superhero, colorful, fun, popcorn movie with a good story and good characters, this is the film that I binged on.
Yes.
And, it just hits all those points that by the end of the movie you feel like you've gone on a journey with this character when he walks away at that graveyard and he realizes that he has to continue being Spider-Man, and that takes precedence over his personal life. And so to me, you really get a sense of who that character is, and you walk away from that movie saying, I know this character. It's not a character in the movie. It feels like a real person. And so, aside from that, Tobey Maguire does a very good job. I don't think he's the perfect Spider-Man, but I think in that moment in this first film, he does a really good job of giving credibility to that character. And obviously you have someone like Willem Dafoe who is kind of hamming it up, but at the same time, Spider-Man to me was always a fun comic. It was never meant to be taken super seriously. And so for me, the marks that Willem Dafoe is hitting in that film are pretty in line with what I wanted from it. I don't think you should ever have a Spider-Man movie like the Amazing Spider-Man showed us. You should never go for some sort of gritty, look at Spider-Man. It should always be fun. It should always be a little campy and cheesy, because that's what it is. It's about a kid that gets bitten by a spider and he can shoot webs from his arms.
Yeah.
And so
exactly.
Yeah. So it does that. But I think the reason I picked it over the second film was because it has a very nostalgic feeling to me. But for me, there are several points in the film where I can look at the film and just say that is how this moment should be. Like when Uncle Ben dies and Peter is with him and he dies, and then he comes back home and there's no dialogue. It's just him and Aunt May like hugging each other basically. And there are several moments in that film that just really speak to that character for me. And I don't know. I feel like it explores more of, I don't know, the relationship between Peter and Spider-Man more than the other films, perhaps. And like I said, I really did like Willem Dafoe. And I feel like this film kind of explored, this and the second film really explored the relationship he has with Mary Jane, which I feel was kind of, stale and bad by the third movie, really. But I don't know. It's just a really fun film to watch, and like Dustin said, with the scene with the bridge. I mean, that's one of the best climactic battle scenes in any comic book movie, because it speaks to both of those characters and what they'll do and what they won't do, and I love it.
Yeah, I
agree. And I gotta say too, and the same goes for really all these movies, but the Danny Elfman score for this film is incredible.
Yes,
and same with the second film. But that again, you hear that music and you immediately know that character, and it fits the movie so well. And so that's a big part of it. But.
Yeah, and for me, I like struggled to figure out whether I was going to put the first one or the second one on my list. I knew it was one of them. I could not decide which one, and eventually ended up. Yeah, no, I love both of them so much. So, yeah, definitely, I agree with everything you said.
And I got to say too that the third film is not nearly as bad as people claim.
No, it's
not.
It's certainly better than both amazing movies. And,
oh yeah, absolutely.
Well,
I'm not looking at the third film when I say that the Peter MJ thing was played out by that movie, but
Yeah, it was. But I'd like to say real quick about the third movie. I mean, I agree with you, John. I mean, the only thing I really dislike in that movie is that stupid jazz scene. But I really do like the concept of the darkness within yourself, and what happens when you kind of let yourself dip into your lesser tendencies. And just and the idea. I mean, I thought that visually the scene where he's trying to rip off the symbiote in the bell tower. And there's a real specific shot where he's ripping it off of himself, and it's like a real wide zoom going right back into him, and he's screaming, trying to rip this thing off of him. And I thought it was such like a visceral visual representation of what is when you really are trying to rid yourself of any evil. It's sort of what it like any I just thought it was a real compelling image of like, you don't want this anymore, and evil in its nature will fight to stay within you and keep corrupting you. Right. And that Spider-Man was screaming and struggling and not giving up, trying to it's just a suit, like, it's a dumb CGI suit, that's like making these little squeaky squeal noises while he's trying to pull it off. But what it represented of the character of Spider-Man, of like, I do not want this to be part of me. This is not who I am, and this has got to go. And I thought it was a real compelling, and I really do like Spider-Man 3, and I like so by no means are we banning any mention of this film, because Spider-Man 3 deserves recognition as well.
Yeah, I mean,
I agree.
I love Spider-Man 3. Is it the weakest of the three? Yeah, definitely. But I mean, like, it's still better than a lot of the superhero movies that come out. I feel like and the only thing the big issue with that film for me was anything related to Eddie Brock. I thought he was horrible.
Yeah, he's bad.
Yeah,
he's definitely the low point.
Well, let's semi-continue this. Dustin, let's talk about, you and I both picked Spider-Man 2. And this was your number 2, and this was my number 3 film. So I guess, why did you pick this one over Spider-Man 1?
I eventually picked this one over Spider-Man 1 for a couple of reasons. While I think I do prefer Willem Dafoe's Goblin to Alfred Molina's Doc Ock as just sort of a primary antagonist.
Rosie!
I do too. That's not the popular the vote. I'm surprised.
No. Nope, you are not. While that's true, I think that this film takes everything that was done in the first film and amplifies it in a good way. So all of the action is better. All of the character stuff is deeper. Everything to me is just more involving and more emotional. So first of all, if we just start with Peter Parker. So in the first film, Peter, you get the sense that life kind of tends to drag him down a little bit. But it's not until the second film that you really start seeing him have to deal with rent and deal with living in a crummy apartment and awful job and awful people. Just like all of this stuff just weighing him down. His aunt can't make can't pay her bills, and here she is giving him money. All of this stuff is just stockpiling. His girl is engaged to another man. All of this stuff is just stacking one on top of another, and now his best friend is against him. There's literally everything in this film to drag Peter down. The first scene of the movie is him being fired. So it like, to me, just amplifies everything about it. And like we've been talking about Batman, a character who takes life's challenges and makes them strengths. That's exactly what happens here. So Peter takes all of this stuff and doesn't let it affect him to the point of, depression or anger or whatever. He's just still who he is. And that is a good person, someone who tries as hard as they can and gives 100% at everything that they do. And sometimes things fall through the cracks. Sometimes you don't live up to your own expectations. And sometimes you don't get what you want. But still, you do what you do for the greater good of the people around you. So Aunt May has that classic speech in there about, I believe there's a hero in all of us, basically talking about how he can inspire people around him. I mean, this is like, you could, if you pulled that speech out and plopped that into like a template, like that should be the template for every superhero story ever told. I believe there's a hero in all of us. And she even says, even if we have to give up the thing that we want most. And that to me speaks so incredibly deeply about the character of Peter Parker, who sacrifices everything that he has for other people to be happy and other people to be healthy and other people to be safe. That to me is Peter Parker in a nutshell. And that to me is a hero. And so, it's no secret, what I've said about Marvel's villains over the years, but I believe sometimes that's the case with their heroes as well, and with DC as well. I'm not just going to call out Marvel. But a lot of times heroes aren't heroes. They're more like the term has become anti-hero, like, Deadpool or whatever. But I hate Deadpool because he's not a hero. You can't classify him as a hero. Yeah, maybe he does some good, but it's not really for the good. It's just because of whatever. And so to me, Peter Parker is like a Batman or like a Superman who will always do what's good just because it's good. And to me, this film just speaks to that so incredibly richly. And in the end, Peter does get the reward for his perseverance, right? He gets Mary Jane at the end of this film. Also, at the end of the film, one of my favorite moments is here's Doc Ock so like blinded by these tentacles. He takes off his mask and he says, "Doctor, let me help you," basically. And the whole thing is, even at this point, even at the climax of the film where the villain is at his most evil, Peter believes that Doc Ock can be redeemed. And to me, that speaks so deeply to the character too. So for me, it's just all of this like wrapped up all in one to make what I think still is a benchmark movie for superhero films. So
yeah, agree.
I agree. I mean, I just building what you said, Dustin. I mean, Peter Parker is the ultimate relatable hero. He embodies both virtue and self-sacrifice, and really inspires us to be the best of ourselves, even when it feels like we can't handle all the pressures of our lives. We all at times, I picked this over the first one. I mean, all these virtues of his are all present in the first movie, but for the same reason, everything in this movie is amplified and is built upon. The action sequences are taken up way more. Because just on a technical level, the first one used a lot more wires and stuntmen and stuff, and I was kind of glad when this movie had a lot more just computer generated action, because I expected some pretty spectacular stuff for a Spider-Man movie, and I was there's some stuff that they just would not be able to pull off practically, and I'm glad that they made some pretty grounded but exciting action sequences. I mean, this is a wall crawler who shoots webs and has lightning fast reflexes, and he's very acrobatic, and he's fighting a guy with 8 limbs. And I just thought that, all right, well, and this is what I expected, and they delivered on it. But more importantly, with the character of Peter Parker, I mean, he represents, he's very relatable, because we can all, this film more than the other, you can really relate to the pressures he faces as a regular guy who also has responsibilities as Spider-Man. I mean, I wonder how many hours Peter Parker is able to sleep, and I wonder, I mean, there's a great little visual device they use throughout the film, which is Peter's always somewhere and he's trying to go for the last glass of champagne, and someone always grabs it first, and even when he finally grabs it, he takes a swig and it's already empty. It's a dirty one. There's nothing in it. So this is a guy who always is just too late to get the thing that he wants, even one little thing he wants. And just that constant feeling, to remind you of what it feels like to be this guy. He's, never on time for events, not able to be there for his friends. We're all very busy in our lives, but just me personally, I mean, I work 2 jobs. I have a family. And there are times where I feel like I can't balance everything in my life. I'm not Spider-Man. If I were, I would feel these same pressures as Peter Parker. But like I can relate very much to the idea of I can't do all this. Like, and what about what I want? You know, and it's really inspiring to see a character who reminds you, like, no matter what, be good. You know, be good and do good, even when it's difficult. It really is the with great power comes great responsibility. When you are good and you are given many gifts, you have a responsibility to use those gifts for other people. And just the heart and the character of Peter Parker is endlessly appealing. And yeah, this movie's great.
Yeah.
Intelligence is not a privilege; it's a gift.
Yes.
You use it for the betterment of mankind.
Brilliant, but
Did
lazy.
Bernoulli sleep before he wrote The Curves of Quickest Descent?
Rosie, I love this boy.
See you in Sweden, Otto.
No, that's right, Otto. Like, with this film, they took some liberties with the Doc Ock character, who is, you know, in the comics, an extremely evil dude. And the only villain to ever kill Spider-Man up to this point, actually.
Yeah.
So, and I consider Doc Ock to be Spider-Man's like greatest villain. And so in this film, they were able to make him sympathetic and make him out to be a good person who has all these bad things happen to him. But he's, you know, they took some liberties with that, but it works in this film. It never stands out as like a glaring character change, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as far as he's a good person, and he also is a good adversary for Spider-Man because he has the intelligence of Peter Parker. They match up in that way, but it's not. It doesn't fall into that Marvel category where they're the same person, though. You know,
Right.
I just think that real quick with Tobey Maguire, I mean, he is the consummate Peter Parker. I mean, I know we only have one person so far to compare him to, but I just think that all those, even just down to, like I said, with the idea of the virtue and someone who completely rejects, you know, any internal evil or selfish tendencies. I mean, even Tobey Maguire, he doesn't have a deep voice. You barely see him, like, you know, scowl or anything. I just really enjoyed Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker, and this is probably the best example of it, is this movie.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we got our last film. This was the only one that made all three of our lists. Dustin at number 5, John at number 2, and me at number 1. This is 2014. What?
we all hate it.
Yes, this is Captain America: The Winter Soldier. This is a great movie. I mean, this was obviously the follow up to technically, I guess, to the first Captain America, but obviously it's within the MCU. But the reason I really like this movie is because, and it's my number 1, because not only does it work as a piece of the larger universe, it shines as a standalone film, regardless of Marvel context. But while also being able to completely stand apart from it, it's one of the only films and does the best job of all the Marvel movies to cause a ripple effect within the universe while also being able to stand alone from it. So it works both as an episode of the Marvel story, but also by itself as a political thriller. And I just thought the action was, again, like with any good follow-up, the action was way more advanced. I mean, just again reestablishing just the differences between well-trained soldiers or other mercenary dudes and just the power of Captain America. I mean, that scene on the boat at the beginning, like he's throwing his shield at people, which is I'm guaranteeing you it's breaking bones. He's kicking people in the rails. He's throat punching. He's breaking spines. I mean, a lot of these action sequences, particularly the one in the street with the Winter Soldier with like the knife and everything. I mean, yeah. I kept thinking of like The Raid. I mean, I'm just thinking it's just some of the best fighting choreography action I've ever seen. And while I really like the fight scenes in Age of Ultron, this is a movie where basically his superpower is he's at peak physical condition, so it all feels very realistic, and therefore it all feels very much more tense and relatable than Iron Man shooting people with repulsors,
Right.
Mm-hmm. But just everything going on again, like we said with The Dark Knight Rises, having a political or social context with the government surveillance and being true to the character's choices, like Spider-Man would be, with regard to how Captain America would feel about that sort of thing.
Right.
Just everything that it ratcheted up with him, it just improved on everything that had been done before it with that character and before it in the MCU completely. This is a great film.
Yeah, I agree. For me, this one really stands out to me because it says so much about the character. You were talking about the NSA spying and all that, which is, again, kind of like Dark Knight Rises, like you said, very of the moment. But to me, it says so much about Captain America and how he reacts to that. Like, Captain America is very much a symbol for this country and the country's values and ideals. And so, to me, he can stand apart from the government. He stands with the people, and he stands with what's right and what is the foundation of this country. And in this movie, he becomes a fugitive from the government because he disagrees with that, and among other things. But it says so much to me in that scene with Nick Fury when they're talking about the spying and the helicarriers and all that. That says so much about the character just in that one scene to me, and how he just rejects that idea flat out.
Yes.
And, Is that something like we used to wait for the crimes to actually be committed or something? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. This isn't freedom. This is fear, and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And, to me, it's very of the moment and speaks to me because that sort of stuff is actually going on. So it's great having a character that stands up for the common people, and it fits within the character. And you have it introduces a lot of interesting things to the universe, particularly like bringing back Bucky and the ramifications that has and things like that. Like the action sequences and it's just a great movie overall.
And I know I sound like a broken record, but I think, there again, Steve Rogers is one of my favorites, if not probably is my favorite from the MCU, just because, he's just a good guy. He's just a hero who does what's right because he can and because he should. And that doesn't mean that he's perfect. I think that you're right, John, that he's very well explored as a character in this film. Not that he wasn't in his previous film, but this brings it into the modern context, into the modern, storyline of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, whereas the first Avenger was very separate. So this brings it, into play for the storyline at large, and explores who he is beyond just, oh no, I missed that dance with Peggy. And because that's not what a character is, you know what I mean? Like,
right.
And so, and I hate that we keep harping on that. Peggy. Well, you know what? What I loved about Winter Soldier is he kind of goes there to get some closure with her. And so you get a cool moment with her. You get cool stuff, throughout the film that just show you who Steve is as a person and where his head is at. And I think all of that stuff, like we said, will not only did it in some ways maybe carry over into Age of Ultron, but it will inevitably carry over into Civil War as well. So yeah, for its place in the Marvel Universe as well as its role as a standalone film, I think it's, just like heads above everything else Marvel's made for me.
Yeah.
And real quick, I gotta say one thing too. This is a small thing in the overall scheme of things, but the character of Sam Wilson is introduced in this movie, and the way his character is handled is so seamless. You get why him and Cap get along, and you get why they're friends. And introducing a sidekick character like that, especially one that's going to have a big impact on the universe, like Falcon will eventually, but it just felt natural. It didn't feel forced at all, and that was a small thing, but it's that sort of
Yeah, absolutely.
I agree with both of you. I mean, it's a great film. It was executed very well, and I feel insanely secure that the Infinity War movies are going to be handled by the Russo brothers who directed this film, because it's just a phenomenal piece of filmmaking. And I really think, and Dustin, it's just like you said, even that stinger after Ant-Man. You'd said that stinger after Ant-Man, which was essentially a little piece from Civil War, which is also directed by these directors, the Russos. That stinger, which was directed by them, was better directed than the entire film of Ant-Man, and it's just to be able to be able to pick out their distinct style from just one small little piece of a scene. Imagine and this movie being a testament to their talent. I'm just really excited to see what they do with the movies going forward.
Me too.
Yeah.
Well, guys, that's going to do it for this episode. We've all got places to go and people to see. So, everyone, thank you for listening. Thank you for motivating us to do 100 of these episodes. This is cool, and I'm Dustin, John. I'm glad you both were able to find time to do this thing with me today.
This
is a great
Thank
list.
you guys for working with my crazy schedule too. I appreciate it.
No, it's cool. It's cool. Okay, well, yeah.
I secretly resent you.
What?
But that's okay.
Well, it's not so secret anymore, is it, John?
But that's okay. Now.
All right, well,
I hate you.
That's going to do it for this episode. Find us on iTunes, HooperCast, all that stuff, Google HooperCast, and all those other things. Donate and share with your friends. On the next episode, I will probably be done with the entire Justified series, so I'll probably have thoughts on that. Until then, everyone, have a good weekend. Enjoy the movies. Enjoy some of these movies, perhaps. And see you later. Bye, guys.
Stay hooping.
Woo.